Desert Convoy Courage, ambushed in the desert. One woman's life-saving decision. The desert was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that hums in your bones, that makes the wind sound like a whisper from ghosts. The sun bled across the dunes, painting everything in gold and dust. A convoy of military vehicles crawled through the endless sand, their engines growling like tired beasts. Among them sat Lieutenant Mara Cole, an off-duty logistics officer returning from a border assignment. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to be in command. But within the hour, she would be the reason dozens of soldiers and civilians lived to tell their story. It was supposed to be a routine escort. The convoy was carrying supplies and a handful of medical staff through a remote desert pass. Radio contact was weak, but morale was high. Inside her vehicle, Mara looked out at the horizon, a golden sea under a white-hot sky. She remembered something her father used to say: a soldier's real test doesn't come when the guns are drawn. It comes when no one's expecting it. Minutes later, that test arrived. A thunderous explosion tore through the silence. The lead truck vanished in a ball of fire. The ground shook. Sand flew like a storm. In the distance, figures emerged from behind the ridges, armed militants, surrounding them on both sides. The radio crackled with panic. The convoy was trapped. The desert erupted with gunfire. Bullets ripped through metal and glass. Smoke rose like black pillars against the sun. The commanding officer was hit within the first minute. The soldiers scattered for cover, disoriented and scared. Mara crawled out of her vehicle, ducking under the whizzing bullets. She saw the wounded commander lying beside a burning truck. His radio was destroyed, his blood soaking into the sand. He tried to speak but only managed one sentence: "Don't let them take the convoy." She didn't hesitate. She grabbed his weapon, his radio earpiece, and stood up amidst the chaos. Her voice cut through the calms like steel. "This is Lieutenant Cole. I'm taking command. We hold position and form a perimeter, now." Her calm, commanding tone snapped the soldiers back to reality. One by one, they followed her lead, regrouping around the remaining vehicles. The militants were closing in. Mara used the smoke and terrain to her advantage, ordering her team to create a defensive circle with the remaining trucks. A medic screamed. One of the civilians had been hit. Mara ran to help, sliding across the sand, pressing her scarf against the wound. The young man, barely 20, looked up at her with glassy eyes. "Are we going to make it?" he whispered. "Yes," she said firmly. "You're going home. I promise." Her words were half lie, half prayer, but they gave the others strength. Mara noticed a ridge slightly ahead, a natural vantage point. She shouted orders, directing 2 soldiers to move under the smoke and secure it, even as bullets cut the air around them. The heat was relentless, but adrenaline made her numb to the sun's sting. She caught sight of a young medic frozen behind a truck, terrified, clutching a first aid kit. Mara sprinted across the open sand, her boots kicking up clouds of dust, and grabbed him by the arm. "Move! Cover me!" she barked, and together they slid into relative safety behind a wrecked Humvee. Nearby, a vehicle's fuel tank was punctured, leaking like molten silver in the sun. Mara realized it could be a trap if the militants got close. She made a split-second decision, ordering a soldier to douse sand over it to prevent ignition. Minutes dragged like hours, each second thick with fear and tension. Sniper shots cracked the air unpredictably, making every shadow a potential threat. Mara's mind raced. Every strategy, every positioning mattered. She wasn't just defending vehicles, she was defending lives, fragile and fleeting in the desert inferno. Every command she gave, every risk she took, stitched the line between survival and annihilation, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down like the scorching sun above. For hours, the sun scorched above as the firefight dragged on. Ammunition ran low. Water was almost gone. The heat was merciless. Some soldiers started collapsing from exhaustion. Mara crawled to the broken radio unit, its wires hanging out like veins. She tore apart a flashlight, stripped the copper coil, and rewired the antenna. It was a desperate gamble. Command base, This is Falcon 9. We are under attack, heavy casualties. Need air support immediately. Silence. Then static. And a faint voice. Copy that. Hold your position. Air support inbound. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. The militants launched one last assault. Dozens of them surged from the dunes, screaming, firing wildly. Mara climbed onto one of the trucks, firing back with every round she had. Her hair was soaked with sweat, her uniform torn and blood-stained. A bullet grazed her shoulder, but she didn't stop. Her voice roared through the radio, "Hold your ground. No one falls today." The sun seemed to dim as the first rescue choppers appeared on the horizon. The air filled with the thunder of rotors. Missiles struck the enemy positions, scattering them in waves of sand and flame. When it was over, the desert fell silent again, but this time, it was a silence of survival. Mara sat against the side of a bullet-riddled truck, her hands trembling. Around her, medics treated the wounded, soldiers wept quietly, and smoke curled into the evening sky. A young private approached her, eyes wide with gratitude. "Ma'am, we would have all died if it weren't for you. No. You followed orders. You fought together. That's what saved us." But deep down, everyone knew, without her quick thinking, they would have been nothing but names on a memorial wall. When the helicopters finally lifted off, the desert looked peaceful again, as if it hadn't just witnessed a storm of blood and courage. Days later, when reports reached headquarters, her name was barely mentioned. Officially, she was part of the team. No medals, no ceremonies, no headlines. Just silence. But among those who survived, she became something else, a legend. Soldiers spoke her name like a prayer, a reminder that leadership isn't given by rank, but earned by heart. Years later, when asked about that day, Mara simply said, "I didn't save anyone. I just refused to give up." Time passed, but the desert kept its memory. The burned-out vehicles were reclaimed by the dunes, the tracks vanished under shifting sands, yet the story lived on. Somewhere out there, beneath the endless sun, the wind still carries whispers of her name, the woman who stood alone when everything burned. And though history may have overlooked her, those she saved never forgot. They called her the guardian of the desert. If this story moved you, if courage like Mara's reminds you that one person can change everything, like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories of heroes history almost forgot. Because sometimes, the bravest battles happen far from the headlines.